Welcome back to episode 3 of this Q&A type video series without a name. It's good to have you back. It's been a while. In this episode, we're going to talk about what happened to my Kodak photo booth. We're going to unbox this crazy recent pickup, and we're going to monochrome modify or debayer a sensor together because somebody asked about that, and I have still never done it, so then I just did it, and we can talk about that together and answer so many more of your questions. If you want your question answered, then drop a comment in this video asking me the question, and I will try to get to it in the next video, as many as I can, and hopefully in less than a month. We'll see how long that will take. But first, before we open this package, some recent photo news. The only photo news recently that I kind of care about is Sony might buy Tamron, and I won't go into those details. You should look that up yourself. And like everyone's theorizing if that will even happen, and then if it does, what that will mean. I'll just say that I really like third-party lens options. I always have for over a decade. I've normally never buy first-party lenses. So I would just hope that this doesn't ruin that part of the market, that we can still get great, high-quality, affordable third-party lenses. That would be all I would say about that. Hopefully that stays the same. And then for the creator shout out, I'm gonna shout out my friend Colton. I actually have his photo book over here. It wasn't even for sale. I just begged for it that I could buy it. It's pretty cool. He did a cool series photographing candy, I think with the 645D, Contax 645D, or maybe some other cameras as well. He has that document on his channel, along with digicams, quirky cams, all that good stuff. So if you're into that, which you might be because you're watching my channel, then go check out his channel. Okay, now to this package because I'm very excited to open it, as you might have guessed. It looks a little rough around the edges. That's because it spent 30 days on a container ship going across the sea from China to California. They just put a box inside of a box. I guess that's pretty good packaging. This is the first time I've bought something from a website called Superbuy. Superbuy is a proxy service that works like Buy, which I've used and talked a lot. They sponsored my channel for a while, that was a proxy service for buying things from Japan. This is buying things from China. So Superbuy, I'd heard about it from some other people and they said it was good. So I thought I'd give it a chance. Well, it did show up and I was able to track it. That whole experience actually has been really good so far. So the big question will be whether or not this is what it is and it works. So let's see. And the only reason you would go through the hassle of buying something from a foreign country is if you can save a ton of money and or you can find something super rare that you can't find in your own country. And that is the case. I guess both of those cases are true with this camera. And there were more expensive options to ship it, but I chose the cheapest, the container ship, which was very slow. And there you have it. This is a Contax, I can't even say it, Contax in digital. Contax's only DSLR they ever made. Also by like a month or two, the first released full frame DSLR. So some pretty amazing history. I have a whole video coming up in detail about this. If you're very astute, you might have noticed I already had one of these, so that'll be part of the video too. Okay, well, anyway, don't want to spoil that for the video. I'm going to be shooting with this camera for a little bit, learning some quirks about it. And there will be a full video about that camera soon, which will probably be one of the best videos on my channel ever. I am so excited about that camera and talking about it. Some of the cool history behind it. Okay, but now to get to your questions. And remember, we have an entire DSLR to modify today, and we will get to that. Let me start that over. Min0524 asks, quick question, what happened to the home photo booth? That was a cool project. That was a cool project. Speaking of best things ever on my channel, that was one of my favorite things ever to explore, to grab. The whole story behind that was wild. I drove many 100 miles to go pick it up. I just built it into a little vacation me and my son took, which we had awesome memories from that trip. So that was amazing. Brought that in from a photo lab or photography studio that had it in their shop somewhere. Got it working, which took a long time with some hardware fixes and software fixes and learning the whole Sun Solaris system, which was crazy. Anyway, long story short, yeah, I don't have it anymore. Because my wife hated it. It was huge. It took up a big part of our basement and she was not a big fan. I do, however, still have the components from it. So the case had to go, which I miss. It was cool, but I still have all the setup, the printer, the computer and stuff, because that could pack down much smaller. Okay, next question is from Warren Binder, who said, that they've been looking at purchasing one of these old converted DSLRs like the Nikon Contax that I have. Would you have any recommendations for one that doesn't break the bank? So I think, let me just grab it. I think that question came up in particular because I was showing off this DCS 460 where they used a Nikon film body and just slapped this Kodak digital gut thing on it, which is super cool. There'll be a video about this hopefully by the end of the year. And then I have my DCS 760, which is my favorite ever. I'd really like to get a monochrome version of this, but they're super hard to find. And when you do find them, too expensive. But I actually wouldn't recommend any of these, not just because of the price tag, which you mentioned, like doesn't break the bank, but because they're so finicky to use. You'll spend most of your time buying dead copies that don't work, or they work for a minute and then break, fighting with like battery pack issues and proprietary batteries, fighting with memory card formats and formatting. And once you get into all of that, it just starts to become less fun, and especially like it just starts draining the bank, which is not cool at all. I've talked about this before in one of my other videos, but I'm isolated a little bit from that because I make money from this YouTube channel. So when I make a video, I can try to recoup some of the cost of I've lost in these things. A lot of the money I make here just goes to that and like medical bills. But so anyway, I can't with good conscience recommend any of these. You can talk to the broader community. I get messages all the time of people who have bought multiple copies and can never get them to work. And they're sinking hundreds of dollars into these. So I can't with good conscience recommend them. That said, if you want to experiment with just a good old DSLR in general, if you want one that's super quirky, that Minolta RD175 video I made, that's actually a very viable camera if you just want a quirky one. There's a little bit of stuff you have to do to get the card to read correctly and then onto your computer and to use the files. But the camera works, the batteries you can still use today and still find today. And there's not any huge known issues with the cameras breaking all the time or anything. But then if you just want something classic and good, there are so many classic early DSLRs that are just fantastic, way easier to use, cheaper, less likely to break. Like the original Canon 5D is a classic. Some of these older Nikons, they're not even that old, but like the D200, that's newer. Anyway, I think you can get a lot of fun out of those cameras, spend a lot less, actually enjoy photography instead of spending most of your time in the office trying to get them to work. Okay, and the next question is from Yinbin64, which I think this is the third time I've answered your question, so good questions. Let's just make it a tradition. Have you ever actually broke or destroyed a camera on accident? And separate question, what was your greatest camera find at all time? I actually have good stories about both of those. I am incredibly lucky with cameras. I should have broke more cameras than I actually have. One time my wife accidentally dropped a camera, totally not her fault. I had left the bag in the middle of the living room, unbuttoned. So when she picked it up, it kind of dumped out. And that broke the lens and a little bit of the camera, but I was able to repair it. The lens I sold and got a new one. I have broken a film SLR when trying to repair it. I just made it worse. That wasn't a huge loss. It wasn't like a rare camera or anything. And then in just a minute, you'll see me attempt to monochrome convert a DSLR, in which case I may very well break that camera. But I've been really lucky and haven't broken very many. And then my best camera find of all time, I actually do have one. This was years and years and years ago, back when I lived in Texas. And I'll try to dig up a picture, but I don't think I have one. Somebody was selling a lot of Contax gear that came from like their uncle or someone who had passed away. So they didn't know much about it. And they just threw it up for 500 bucks or something. And it had like a K20D was the camera, so kind of older, but then a bunch of great lenses. They had DA star lenses, FA star lenses, including the 400 millimeter, that's what it was, the FA star 400 millimeter f5.6 lens, which is just such a cool lens. And at the time, by far the most expensive photographic thing I owned. So I used it for a while, but then got really scared of breaking it and then sold it to somebody for a great deal on Contax forums, and they took amazing pictures with it. Yeah, it was a fantastic deal. I guess the only downside was when I received it and then opened it up, it smelled heavily of smoke and took months to get that out of all the lenses. But by far the best find I've ever had. Okay, and then the next question actually comes from over a month ago. It's just taken me a while to answer it. And this comes from Packy Puck, who said, have you ever tried or experienced debayering a sensor of any kind or any way? I'm about to try it on my old cheap 400D. It feels scary though. So you might have already attempted it by this point, but if you haven't, and to anyone else interested, let's do it together right now. So just so we're on the same page, debayering a sensor means removing the Bayer color filter array off of the sensor. This is a microscopic like film sensor. It's not like a glass sensor that goes on top, or not sensor, but a filter that goes on top that allows your pixels basically to see color. This is the red, the green, the blue that goes on top that you see in those Bayer pattern on most sensors. The digital technology in the sensor itself can only see monochrome, the luminance levels. And so by adding these on top and then with some mathematics going on and talking to the neighboring pixels, we can determine color. But if you remove this, we're back to monochrome only and you get some advantages. And in the past, when I've experimented with converted monochrome cameras, those advantages are there. They're just a little slight. The two ones should be slightly sharper because you don't have to do that demosaicing process. That's the kind of the algorithms going on that are figuring out color. And then the second thing is that each pixel receives all the light. No longer is it blocked a little bit by red, green, or blue filters. And so you actually gain some stops of light. And that is true. That was the most dramatic difference I noticed. I took two identical cameras, just one was debayered and one was not. It was the Contax K5 II, or I can't remember what it was. And I took two identical cameras and took pictures, and it was about a third stop brighter or something like that. It was noticeably brighter on the debayered sensor. So we're gonna try this today with the Nikon D60, which I bought for $50. And the reason I did this is twofold. One, it is cheap. It's also a great little camera, but also because if you're gonna attempt something like this or any modification, it's really nice to have somebody who's already done something like that. And in this case, I've used this a lot. This site is called LifePixel, and they do infrared conversions, but they also have a bunch of tutorials posted for dozens of models of cameras where you can see them tear it all the way down to removing the infrared filter, which is what they specialize in. So this is great for infrared modifications that you want to do. But in my case, I just need to get all the way down to the sensor. So I went through a couple of cheap models just to see which one looked the easiest. This one was really easy. There is some desoldering you have to do, but it's only two little cables and it's pretty easy. Now, I think a lot of people don't realize this, but your sensor is not the thing you can touch when you open your shutter or right there on your camera. There are several layers of glass before the sensor, you're actually touching the sensor. So there's the infrared filter, which we have to remove, but even under that on the sensor itself is this glued on filter, which is very strong glue. And I've seen people chip away at this, but then they break it and then it shatters all over the place and makes a big mess. And it's really easy to break your sensor as well trying to chip this away. So I used a heat gun that I bought on Amazon for less than $20, and this worked. It just took a while of heating it up, but eventually I was able to heat it up enough that the glue melted and it just slid right off, which was perfect. And then you're left with the sensor itself exposed. Now, something I didn't really realize, I should have done more research, is that there's kind of multiple layers printed right on here. There's this layer called the micro lenses that I don't really understand what those are exactly, but someone can explain it below. And then underneath that is the Bayer filter. And it depends on the sensor itself and when it was manufactured and stuff, how all this works. But there's multiple layers you have to get through. And looking online, there's lots of ways to remove both of these. The most professional way is with chemicals that seem very dangerous and hard to get, and people guard those secrets carefully about the actual chemicals. There is a white paper out there from some scientific research about how to debayer it, and I didn't understand at all what it was talking about. But the redneck way, which I'm gonna attempt today, is just to scrape it off using some sort of material. Somebody on a forum said that they were able to, with their Canon DSLR, just use a piece of Scotch tape and stick it on and then pull it off, and that the Bayer filter would be removed. And I tried that, and maybe this tape is too cheap, but it just left tape residue. Some stuff did come off the sensor. You can kind of see some residue there, which is interesting. But it mostly just left a sticky residue. So I would not do this because this was really difficult to remove. Next, I tried using a wooden toothpick. People said using sharp wooden objects works. What you're trying not to do is to damage the sensor permanently. You have to pick something sharp enough that you can scrape them off, but not sharp enough to actually damage the sensor. And I found the wooden toothpick was not at all sharp enough to get through any of these layers. And I tried a couple of other things like my plastic guitar picks, which I thought would work because they're stiffer plastic, but still soft enough, I thought. And even those would not get through the filter. So finally, I resorted in using this screwdriver that I have, which I do not recommend doing this at all. This seems like a terrible tool for the job, but it's what I had, and I just wanted to get this over with. At this point, I thought I maybe have already damaged the sensor, so I just wanted to see if any of this would work. And sure enough, this was removing the layers. I thought I was getting through the layers before, potentially, but as I started scraping a little bit more hard with this, I was seeing There definitely was more layers to go down. And it looks incredibly sloppy, but I actually was sort of trying here, and this took me over an hour of gently scraping, trying not to damage the sensor, get around the edges, and remove material off the top, and it still looks awful. So this is an incredibly difficult process if you wanted to get something like really good looking. But at this point, I didn't know if I was deep enough. I thought I was, and then also I don't know if I'd already bricked the sensor. There's just really no good way to tell at this point. So I decided to call it quits here, even though there's more work to do, and just plug it all back into the camera, put it all back together, and just see if the camera even works. So here is the camera now with a lens, and it does indeed power on. Now clock has been reset, great. Okay, but the real question is, does it take a picture, or is the sensor just a bunch of garbly goop? And the answer to that is, it does. It takes an image. Here, let me show you this. This is crazy. That looks like weird abstract art with all the terrible scraping I did and some what looks like dead horizontal pixels going on there. So it looks like I broke some things, but amazingly did not entirely brick the camera. I'll put some images on the screen. Obviously not the result I think anybody would go for, but the Bayer filter is gone for sure, because if I put it in the JPEG mode where it's going to be trying to do the demosaicing process and interpret color, everything is pink and nonsense, even with the infrared filter on. Right, and also the metering on the camera, it's overexposing by a lot. I had to drop it down to at least negative 0.7 exposure compensation to get a good looking exposure. So I think some of you are going to have mixed feelings about that. Obviously I ruined a camera, so there's that, but I also think it's cool that I did it and the result is kind of interesting. So I might shoot with it and just post on Instagram, and people will be like, what the heck did you do? Like, why does it look so bad? Yeah, if I were to do this again, I wouldn't even attempt scraping. It just seems so incredibly hard. Maybe with a different tool, but you're always gonna have the edges messed up. Maybe I'll try the chemical and try to look that up in the future. That's a future thing. And then if I ever find something that actually works chemically, I will share it with you all. Okay, that was crazy. Let me know if you want to see more about debayering a sensor or a whole video just on that stuff, but we'll answer a few more questions next. LTKOS asks an interesting question I've heard before, saying that I've tried many different cameras, which is true. It's 100 probably more. Can you guess what someone else's photo was taken with based on certain characteristics you've noticed, like the brand, the size or type of sensors? And then he talks about, or they talk about the magic of CCD and things like that. Is there really a different look and stuff? The short answer is no, absolutely not. I cannot tell the difference. If you just post photos on Instagram, I'm gonna be all over the place. And I've tested this with you all before just for fun. And I posted some pictures on Instagram and say, guess the camera, and it's never remotely close. The funniest one was when I did the iPhone 4S photos, and people were like all the way from digital medium format to film to some DSLRs, etc. And it was an iPhone 4S. And those photos looked great. So the short answer is no. The long answer is sometimes you can guess some things, like sometimes you can guess the size of sensor just because of like certain depth of field and focal length combinations that wouldn't otherwise be possible. CCD versus CMOS, no, because it just totally depends on editing and stuff, and when the sensor and who released it, for what colors are baked into it and stuff. I think we think that a lot, that we could guess cameras like, oh, was it a Canon or a Nikon? And I just don't believe you can. In a blind test, I don't believe you could. Okay, the next question involves this box of cameras, and it's from Mini Truck Matt, who says, do you have any interest in vintage video cameras, like tape formats or early digital? If so, what are some of your favorites? So this is an area I know very little about, but I'm super interested in learning more. So there's some Instagram accounts I follow where people do vintage digital camcorders or tape and then convert to digital in some different ways. So I've experimented a little bit. That's what this whole thing is. I just bought like a bunch of super cheap, not very notable camcorders from Japan, and almost all of them work. So like this one is a Panasonic Mini DV camcorder, which is really fun to use. So I don't have any tape for it. I'm not using it that way. I'm just using like I have this one, little digital converters that just take the AV output of various kinds and captures it. I have another one in here too, and I don't know where it went, but a different one. And just that alone, like the not any research or knowledge about what's good and what's not, was super fun. So I think I would get into it, and I know there's like better firewire capture and things like that for higher quality. But just for like goofing off and having a lot of fun, these things work great. That's definitely something I'd like to learn more about and get more into as time permits. Okay, and then this username asks, do you still have or use the Pixie, and what are your opinions on it? So the Pixie is the digital rangefinder camera. It's a relatively new camera company from France. They're like a competitors, even if just by the virtue of the fact that they're the only other digital rangefinder camera you can currently buy that's currently being made. And no, I sold mine a while back. So I bought a brand new one. It cost an absurd amount of money. I had a lot of fun with it, enjoyed using it, made a couple of videos about it, but those are 2+ years old now. And then sold it before like the price got even further and I lost even more money, which I was worried about. And yeah, you can pick them up if you put a search alert on eBay. They don't come up very often, but you can pick them up quite affordably now that years have passed. Now we have the Pixie Max version or whatever it's called with the full frame sensor. That wasn't available when I bought my APS-C sized version. And they're mentioning that reviewers right now are having bad experiences with buggy, slow software, things like that. And my experiences on those videos seemed pretty good. And that's true. For the most part, I had a really good experience. I felt like the camera worked fine. I didn't have any weird metering issues. It was not slow or buggy. It just worked. The one buggy thing was that the live view in the phone app was buggy on Android. I don't know if it was on iPhone. And then the other big flaw that bothered me was just the color, like the white balance and color interpretation was weird. And that's because they're writing that whole image pipeline themselves, the software. And so they're kind of doing that from scratch, figuring out color and color science. So I did not like it. I don't know if that's improved, but it was not great. Black and white was awesome. That's easier, of course. And you didn't really ask this, but whether or not I recommend the camera, if you can buy one used and you're into that kind of having something totally different, I do think it is a totally usable camera. Join the Facebook group first, talk to some people and get some feedback and just see like, is this a community I want to be a part of and look cool? Otherwise, it does seem like your money would be better spent buying an older used Leica digital rangefinder because you're just going to have a better, more polished experience. That's not to say the Pixie is awful. It's just, you know, apples to apples currently, that would probably make more sense. Okay, that's it for this time. If you have any more questions, leave them below and I'll get to them in the next video. Keep them coming. It's so fun to answer these good questions and to get to experiment into some fun things. Hopefully we have some more videos coming soon. That'll be really exciting in the month of August and beyond, so stay tuned for that. As always, happy snapping.